Listen to them. Children of the night. What music they make.
They will be destroyed.
Time, monster. You don't belong in this world.
In the book of Romans, chapter 12, verse 21, the Apostle Paul tells us, "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." I'm confident in saying that Victorian author Bram Stoker would agree that those same words would make a good description of the prevailing themes in his 1897 Gothic horror novel, Dracula. The book is considered a genuine classic, whose notoriety far exceeds anything else from Stoker's literary output, spawning a countless number of adaptations, pastiches, and parodies since its original publication, and becoming not only a touchstone of horror fiction, but a staple of widespread popular culture. Despite this, it's become very apparent to me that the general consensus among modern readers is that the famous novel doesn't quite hold up to its lofty legacy. Whenever Dracula, Stoker's original Dracula, comes up in conversation these days, it is often accompanied with sentiments like, "Yeah, I read that. It was okay, I guess. Just not all that interesting." As such, it's rare for me to hear anyone discuss the novel's merits, particularly its themes, in any real depth. Now, I'm not about to criticize anyone for not enjoying this book, but I will say that I think the average reader's dismissal of Dracula has led to a sort of cultural ignorance of the novel's single most important aspect, an aspect which may, in fact, be the reason that so many modern readers dislike it in the first place. Bram Stoker's Dracula is unapologetically Christian. A bit of history between myself and the book. When I was 16 years old, I would frequently borrow audiobooks from the local library and listen to them in the background while playing video games in my room. I went through quite a few lengthy novels this way, although I will say that my comprehension and retention weren't the best, since I was usually distracted by, well, you know. One of the audiobooks I borrowed was an edition of Dracula, and for whatever reason, I never finished listening to it. Whether it was the story itself, or the narrator, or something else, I can't remember. All I do know is that I never bothered to listen past the first few chapters. Later, around age 19, I purchased an Oxford World Classics edition of the book, determined to read it in physical form. I tried on at least 3 separate occasions to read it, but could never get past chapter 5. The reason was always the same. The narrative is told in an epistolary style, formed from the letters, diary entries, and other transcriptions written and compiled by the main characters. The first 4 chapters of the book are comprised of journal entries by Jonathan Harker, an English real estate salesman who travels to Transylvania to finalize the purchase of a sizable property in England by the titular Count Dracula. During his stay in Castle Dracula, Harker begins to notice strange and unnerving things about his mysterious host. He is assaulted by the Count's 3 ghostly wives, and eventually he finds himself locked in his guest room. In the final entries of his journal, Harker expresses his desperate desire to escape his confinement, now that Dracula has supposedly left for England and abandoned the young guest in his crumbling, haunted castle. These first 4 chapters are wonderfully eerie and atmospheric, and I've always enjoyed reading them. However, after chapter 4, the book has a dramatic shift in tone as it collects the writings of other characters back in England. For the next several dozen pages, the novel covers such exciting topics as marriage proposals, tea parties, seaside picnics, and an elderly fisherman rambling about a conspiracy involving the tombstones in a local graveyard. Needless to say, my younger, less patient self was quite put off by the sudden change of pace and would quickly become fed up with the novel, ultimately putting it down in favor of something more exhilarating. However, a little over a week ago, nearly a decade after my last unsuccessful attempt, I decided to give Dracula another chance, keeping my mind completely open and my expectations totally neutral. I am very glad that I did this. If I hadn't decided to give the novel another shot, I never would have discovered the thing that makes it truly special, and for me at least, well worth closer analysis. Chapters 5 through 13 of Dracula are indeed a bit of a slog, but they are a slog with a purpose. They serve to introduce and ingratiate the reader to our primary characters: Harker's wife, Mina, her best friend, Lucy, Lucy's three romantic suitors, Dr. Seward, director of a local asylum, Quincy Morris, a literal gun-toting cowboy from Texas, and Arthur Holmwood, a wealthy, conventionally handsome young nobleman whom Lucy ultimately decides to marry. Surprise, surprise. There is also the Dutch medical professor Abraham Van Helsing, whom, despite being depicted as cryptic and eccentric, soon becomes the novel's closest thing to a central protagonist. After Dracula, who has now relocated to England, kills Lucy and transforms her into his undead scion, our small band of heroes unite in an attempt to destroy the evil Count before he can cause any further tragedies. In addition to the more popular anti-vampire weapons, garlic, fire, stakes to the heart, etc., the one resource the group employs against their undead foe more than anything, as instructed by Van Helsing himself, is their simple Christian faith. You see, though not all of them may state it explicitly, it is heavily implied that every member of our main cast is a devout Christian, or at the very least has some sort of strong spiritual faith. As the leader of our intrepid band, Van Helsing repeatedly impresses upon his comrades the importance of faith, that their confidence in a higher power and greater good is their most powerful weapon against the evils that assail them. At the end of chapter 14, when preparing to explain the nature of vampirism to a skeptical Dr. Seward, Van Helsing says, "I want you to believe." When Seward asks to believe what, Van Helsing answers, "To believe in things that you cannot." He then proceeds to describe faith as something that enables us to believe things which we know to be untrue. As a non-denominational Christian who has attended several classes and lectures on the topic of apologetics, I can tell you truthfully that this definition of faith resonates with numerous teachings straight from the pages of the Bible, and is often used as a talking point when discussing Christian beliefs with a secular audience. This particular scene is notable because it depicts one scholarly man of science explaining such a concept to another scholarly man of science. To be clear, the professor is not telling Seward to trust in things that are factually untrue, but rather to keep his mind open regarding things that his then modern 19th century worldview cannot explain. Christian doctrine presents faith not as something that shields ignorant minds from scientific facts, but as something that maintains belief in infinite possibilities. In the traditional Christian understanding, God is an infinitely complex being, and the world he created is similarly complex. What we know as science is merely that which allows our human minds to perceive and quantify the complexity of the universe. A Christian believes in God not in ignorance of scientifically proven facts, but in the understanding that those facts are only small, incomplete truths which point to a bigger truth. In short, Van Helsing is telling Seward that if he, a scientist, can believe in God, the ultimate intelligence and supernatural good, then surely he can believe in supernatural evil as well. Conveniently, it is that belief in and of itself which will aid them against the undead. Bram Stoker was himself a proud Irish Protestant, but he was also a strong proponent of the scientific method, which, believe it or not, was still a fairly misunderstood concept in the late 1800s. To Stoker, religion and science were not opposing worldviews. They were parallel schools of thought that actually complemented each other. He believed, as I just mentioned, that scientific truth pointed to the greater truth of God. With this in mind, it's no wonder that the main characters of his novel are mostly well-educated individuals who also happen to be Christians. It's obvious to me that the character of Professor Van Helsing was, philosophically speaking, Stoker's ideal hero, a quick-witted, knowledgeable mentor figure who simultaneously maintains a proper understanding of the scientific method, as well as an unshakable faith in a higher power. In this story, a perfect combination of knowledge and belief, shared by our brave vampire-hunting compatriots, defeats that which Stoker saw as the world's prevailing evils: greed, lust, corruption, and closed-mindedness. Circling back to something I mentioned at the beginning, I think it is this prevalent theme of faith that turns off so many readers to Dracula. I mean, the 5 whole chapters about gossip and marriage proposals certainly don't help, but when Dracula was originally published, the Western world was a lot different than it is now. For one thing, it was definitely more religious. Sure, there were plenty of non-believers, but it was generally assumed that most English-speaking people, at the very least, attended church on a regular basis, owned a copy of the Bible, and said their prayers at dinner time. Nowadays, we have a much more secular society, and while this hasn't changed the themes and message of the novel, it has absolutely changed the way people read the novel. I'm not saying that all non-Christians are ignorant barbarians who can't understand the brilliance of Stoker. There are obviously many agnostic and atheistic readers who love this book. But what I am saying is that it does take at least a general familiarity with Christianity to really appreciate what this book is saying. It's in the same kind of boat as The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. Yes, you may love the books even if you don't share the same beliefs as the author, but having that same faith gives so much more meaning to the books. I'd almost recommend that secular audiences do a bit of New Testament research as a primer before reading this novel for the first time, but even I realize that that might be too much of an ask. Now, to be fully transparent, as of this recording, I'm only about 3/4 of the way through Dracula. There could be some horrible upset that forever shatters the faith of our protagonists to the point where they fail in their endeavors to slay the evil Count. But if the numerous movie adaptations I've seen are any hint, I don't think that will be the case. I'm enjoying the book tremendously, though I think ultimately I might be left with a bit of a tough question. Do I like Dracula because it's a good book, or do I like it because I'm a Christian and it presents morals that I agree with and themes that I'm interested in? I'm really not sure at this point. That said, I hope this video can serve as a springboard for a conversation around the book and its myriad aspects, both religious and secular. Am I onto something, or am I way off field and out of my league? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Until next time, as always, farewell and keep reading.